When my son Preston stood at the altar looking dapper in a tuxedo I paid for, I made a choice to keep my mouth shut about the fact that I had legally inherited the entire $18 million Golden Horizon Ranch from my late wife. It turned out to be the single best decision of my 70 years on this earth. Because exactly 1 week after the cake was cut and the champagne was popped, my daughter-in-law, Tiffany, showed up at my breakfast table, not with a thank you card, but with a notary and an eviction notice. She thought she was kicking a helpless, senile old man out of his own home to make room for her golf course investors. She had no idea she was handing a loaded gun to the only man who knew how to use it. But before I tell you how I wiped that arrogant smirk off her face and reclaimed my dignity, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps an old veteran like me share these stories. When I met my wife 42 years ago at a county fair in Millbrook, Montana, I was a young veteran just back from Vietnam, carrying more demons than dollars, and she was the daughter of Thomas Whitmore, the most successful rancher in 3 counties. I can still remember that day like it was yesterday. I was standing by the livestock pens, watching the cattle auctions, when this woman in worn jeans and a flannel shirt walked up beside me. She didn't look at me, just kept her eyes on the cattle, and said, "That Angus in Lot 7 is going to go for twice what he's worth. The rancher selling him knows how to hide a bad hip." I looked at her, surprised. "How can you tell from here?" She finally turned those green eyes on me, and I swear my heart stopped. "Because my daddy taught me to look at what an animal doesn't want you to see. That bull is favoring his left front leg, just barely, but enough that he'll be lame in 6 months. The seller keeps positioning him so that side is away from the crowd." She was right, of course. That bull sold for top dollar to some fool from out of state, and 3 months later, I heard he had to put the animal down. But by then, Margaret and I were already courting, much to her father's dismay. Thomas Whitmore did not approve of his only daughter dating a broke veteran with PTSD and no prospects. He made that clear the first time I came to Sunday dinner at the Golden Horizon Ranch. The ranch house sat on a hill overlooking 15,000 acres of prime Montana grazing land, with the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance like a painting that was too beautiful to be real. "So, Carter," Thomas said, carving the roast beef with deliberate, aggressive strokes, "Margaret tells me you're looking for work. What exactly did you do in the service?" "Infantry, sir. 2 tours." He nodded slowly, like he was considering whether that was worth anything. "Infantry. So you know how to take orders. That's good. But do you know anything about running a business? About making payroll? About managing assets worth millions of dollars?" "Daddy," Margaret said, a warning in her voice. "No, it's a fair question," I said, meeting his eyes. "I don't know anything about those things. Not yet. But I'm willing to learn, and I'm not afraid of hard work." Thomas snorted. "Hard work. Everyone says they're not afraid of hard work until they actually have to do it. This ranch has been in the Whitmore family for 3 generations. It takes more than willingness to keep something like this going." But Margaret saw something in me that her father didn't. Maybe she saw someone who needed saving as much as I saw someone worth fighting for. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Thomas looking on like he was attending a funeral instead of a wedding. The thing was, I proved him wrong. I worked that ranch like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. The work gave me purpose, gave me a reason to push through the nightmares and the cold sweats. I learned everything I could from the older hands, from Margaret, even from Thomas himself, though he never admitted he was teaching me anything. Over the years, Thomas and I developed a grudging respect for each other. He saw that I wasn't going anywhere, that I loved his daughter truly, and that I was committed to the ranch. When he died 15 years ago from a heart attack while mending a fence in the north pasture, his last words to me were, "Take care of my girls, Carter." The ranch and Margaret both. I promised him I would, and I kept that promise for every single day he was gone. But here's where the story gets complicated, and why that decision not to tell Preston about my inheritance matters so much. You see, Thomas Whitmore was old-fashioned in a lot of ways, but he was also shrewd. He knew that family businesses often got torn apart by inheritance disputes, by children who saw dollar signs instead of legacy, by outsiders who married into the family for the wrong reasons. So Thomas set up a trust. A very specific, very carefully constructed trust. The trust stipulated that the Golden Horizon Ranch would pass to Margaret upon his death, with the understanding that she would manage it until her own passing. Then, and only then, would it pass to any children she had. But here's the crucial part, the part that became my salvation. If Margaret chose to, she could designate the ranch to pass to her spouse instead of her children, provided that spouse had worked the ranch for at least 20 years and demonstrated the commitment and capability to maintain the family legacy. Margaret and I had one child together. Preston, named after her favorite uncle who died in the Korean War. We loved that boy more than life itself, but love and blindness often go hand in hand when it comes to your children. Preston grew up on the ranch, but he never took to it. While other ranch kids were out learning to rope and ride, Preston was inside reading fashion magazines and watching MTV. We didn't judge him for it. Everyone has their own path, Margaret always said. But it became clear early on that Preston wasn't going to be a rancher. He went to college in Seattle, studying business and marketing, and when he came back, he had ideas. Big ideas about turning the ranch into an agritourism destination, with yoga retreats and organic farm-to-table restaurants. Margaret and I listened patiently, but we knew those ideas didn't fit who we were or what the ranch was meant to be. Preston moved to Denver after college, got a job at a marketing firm, and visited maybe twice a year. We sent him money when he needed it, which was more often than we liked to admit. Margaret worried about him constantly, wondered if we'd failed him somehow by raising him in such a remote place, away from the opportunities of the city. Then Margaret got sick. Cancer is a thief. It doesn't just steal your health. It steals time, plans, futures. Margaret fought for 18 months, and she did it with the same grace and strength she'd shown in everything else in her life. But as the end approached, she and I had some hard conversations. We were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the mountains, when she brought it up. "Bo," she said, using the nickname only she was allowed to use, "we need to talk about the ranch." I'd been dreading this conversation, but I knew it was coming. "Whatever you want, Maggie. It's yours to decide." She was quiet for a long moment, holding my hand with fingers that had grown thin and fragile. "Daddy's trust gives me a choice. Leave the ranch to Preston, or leave it to you. Preston is your son, our son, and you are my husband, my partner, the man who has worked this land for 40 years. She turned to look at me, and even weak with sickness, her eyes were clear and determined. "Preston doesn't want this ranch, Bo. He never has. If I leave it to him, he'll sell it within a year. Some developer will buy it, subdivide it, and everything Daddy built, everything we've built together, will be gone." "He might surprise us," I said, but I didn't believe it even as I said it. Margaret smiled sadly. "You're a better man than you give yourself credit for, always seeing the best in people. But I know my son. He sees this ranch as a burden, as money he's entitled to because he's my child. He doesn't see it as a legacy, as a living thing that needs tending and respect." "What are you saying, Maggie?" "I'm saying I want you to have it. I want you to inherit the Golden Horizon Ranch. The trust allows it, and it's what I want. You've earned this, Bo. You've loved this land and cared for it like it was your own child. Daddy knew what he was doing when he set up that trust. He was protecting the ranch from people who would destroy it for a quick profit." We talked for hours that night, going over every possibility, every consequence. In the end, Margaret made her decision. She called her lawyer, James Thornton, a man who'd handled the Whitmore family legal matters for 30 years, and she updated her will and the trust documents. The ranch would pass to me, held in a trust that protected it from being sold or subdivided without meeting certain strict conditions. Preston would receive a generous financial settlement from Margaret's personal accounts, enough to set him up comfortably, but the ranch itself would be mine to manage and protect. Margaret made one request. "Don't tell Preston about this until after I'm gone. Let him grieve without the complication of business and inheritance. And Bo, be careful when you do tell him. Make sure he understands this isn't about loving him less. It's about loving the ranch enough to protect it." I promised her I would, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't keep that promise. Not exactly. Margaret passed away on a Tuesday morning in early spring, when the first wildflowers were just starting to bloom in the high meadows. I held her hand as she took her last breath, and something in me broke that day that has never fully healed. The funeral was everything Margaret would have wanted. Simple, dignified, with half the county showing up to pay their respects to a woman who'd been fair in her dealings and generous with her help. Preston came, of course, with his girlfriend at the time, a woman named Ashley who kept checking her phone during the service. After the funeral, James Thornton pulled me aside. "Beau, we need to schedule a reading of the will. I know this is a difficult time, but these things have timelines." "I understand. Set it up for next week." James nodded, then hesitated. "You know what's in the documents. Have you thought about how you want to handle this with Preston?" "I'll tell him after the reading. I just need a few days to figure out how to explain it in a way he'll understand." But those few days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Every time I thought about sitting Preston down and explaining that his mother had left the ranch to me instead of him, I lost my nerve. It wasn't that I thought the decision was wrong. Margaret had been right about everything. But I knew how it would look to Preston, how it would feel like a rejection, like his mother hadn't thought he was good enough. So I made a different choice. I simply didn't tell him. The ranch operations continued as they always had. I managed the cattle, maintained the property, made the decisions that needed to be made. Preston called occasionally, always asking the same questions. "How are you holding up, Dad? Do you need anything? How's the ranch doing?" I always gave the same answers. "I'm managing. I'm fine. The ranch is the same as always." What Preston didn't know, what nobody except James Thornton knew, was that I was now the legal owner of an $18 million property. The land alone was worth a fortune, 15,000 acres of prime Montana real estate. Add in the cattle operation, the equipment, the ranch house and outbuildings, and the total value was staggering. But I didn't care about the money. I never had. What I cared about was keeping the promise I'd made to Thomas Whitmore and to Margaret. I would protect this ranch, keep it working and productive, and make sure it stayed in hands that understood what it truly meant. I figured Preston would eventually need to know, but I told myself there was no rush. The ranch was secure, I was healthy and capable of running it, and Preston seemed content in his life in Denver. Then, 2 years after Margaret's death, Preston called with news that changed everything. "Dad, I'm getting married. I should have been happy." A father should be thrilled when his son finds someone to share his life with. But from the moment Preston told me about Tiffany Westbrook, something felt off. "Her name is Tiffany," Preston said over the phone, his voice bubbling with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "She's incredible, Dad. Smart, beautiful, ambitious. She works in real estate development. We met at a conference 6 months ago, and I just knew. You know how Mom always talked about how she knew you were the one right away? That's how I feel about Tiffany. 6 months. They'd known each other for 6 months, and he was ready to get married. But I bit my tongue, because what father hasn't worried that his son was rushing into things? "That's wonderful, son. I'd love to meet her. When can you bring her up to the ranch?" There was a pause. "Actually, Dad, we were thinking of having the wedding in Denver. Tiffany has a lot of friends and business contacts here, and it would be easier for everyone." "But your mother's grave is here. The family is here." Another pause, longer this time. "I know, Dad. But Tiffany's family is all in Denver and Boulder. It just makes more sense. You understand, right?" What I understood was that this Tiffany woman didn't want to come to Montana, didn't want to see where Preston came from, didn't want to meet the people who'd known him his whole life. But again, I kept my mouth shut. "Of course. Whatever makes you happy, son." The wedding was set for 3 months later, a lavish affair at some fancy hotel in downtown Denver. Preston asked if I could help with the costs, and because I'm a fool who can't say no to his son, I agreed. I wrote a check for $50,000 from the ranch account, money that represented months of work and careful management. Preston seemed shocked by the amount. "Dad, are you sure? I know the ranch has been struggling since Mom died." That should have been my moment to tell him the truth. To sit him down and explain that the ranch wasn't struggling at all, that his mother had left it to me, that I was actually in a very secure financial position. But I didn't. Instead, I said, your mother would have wanted you to have a proper wedding. Consider it her gift too. I drove down to Denver 3 days before the wedding. The hotel was the kind of place where the doormen wore white gloves and looked at my work boots like I'd tracked in manure. Maybe I had. I'd come straight from the ranch, not wanting to waste time I could have spent working. Preston met me in the lobby, and I barely recognized him. His hair was styled differently, slicked back with some kind of product. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. He looked successful, polished, urban. He looked nothing like the son I'd raised. Dad. He hugged me, and I could smell expensive cologne. I'm so glad you made it. Come on, I want you to meet Tiffany. She was waiting in the hotel bar, and I'll admit, my first thought was that she was beautiful. Blonde hair that probably cost a fortune to maintain, perfect makeup, a dress that showed off a figure that looked like it spent a lot of time in expensive gyms. She stood when we approached, smiling with teeth so white they almost glowed. Mr. Carter, she said, extending a hand with perfectly manicured nails. I've heard so much about you. Preston speaks of you and the ranch constantly. Her handshake was firm, practiced, the grip of someone who'd learned that a good handshake opens doors in business. But her eyes were calculating, assessing, taking my measure in a way that made my old military instincts prickle with warning. Please, call me Beau. And Preston has told me very little about you, so you have the advantage. She laughed, a practiced sound. Well, there's not much to tell. I grew up in Boulder, studied business at CU, and now I work for Apex Development Group. We specialize in luxury real estate projects throughout the Mountain West. Tiffany just closed a huge deal, Preston said, pride evident in his voice. A $50 million resort development near Aspen. Impressive, I said, meaning it. That's a lot of responsibility for someone so young. I'm 32, Tiffany said, a slight edge to her voice. And in real estate development, you either produce results or you're out. I've been producing results since I was 25. Preston was 35. His bride-to-be was 3 years younger, already more successful in her career, and clearly the dominant force in their relationship. Again, alarm bells rang in my head, but I pushed them down. We had dinner that night, the three of us, at a restaurant where the menu didn't have prices and the waiter described each dish like it was a work of art. Tiffany ordered wine that cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries in a month, and she dominated the conversation, talking about real estate markets, investment opportunities, and development potential. Then she turned the conversation to something that made those alarm bells start clanging loud enough to hurt. Preston tells me the ranch is about 15,000 acres. That's prime property in Montana. Have you ever considered developing it? I set down my fork carefully. The ranch is a cattle operation. Has been for 3 generations. It's not for sale, and it's not for development. I didn't say sell it, Tiffany said smoothly. But there are so many options for land like that. Luxury guest ranch, conservation easements that could provide tax benefits, even sustainable development that maintains the rural character while providing revenue streams. You could easily triple the property's productive value without changing its fundamental nature. The ranch's fundamental nature is raising cattle. That's what it's always been, and that's what it will continue to be. Tiffany smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. I didn't mean to overstep. I just see potential everywhere. Occupational hazard. She reached over and squeezed Preston's hand. Your father is right to be protective of his legacy. Something about the way she said, his legacy, bothered me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. The next 2 days were a blur of wedding preparations, rehearsal dinners, and meeting Tiffany's family. Her parents were exactly what I expected. Wealthy, polished, Boulder liberals who looked at me like I was an interesting anthropological specimen. Her father, Richard Westbrook, was some kind of investment banker. Her mother, Charlene, did something with charitable foundations that seemed to mostly involve hosting expensive parties. At the rehearsal dinner, Richard Westbrook cornered me at the bar. Beau, I want to thank you for raising such a wonderful son. Preston is exactly the kind of steady, reliable man we wanted for our Tiffany. Tiffany seems pretty independent. I wouldn't think she needs anyone to be steady for her. Richard laughed. Oh, she's independent all right. But even the most ambitious people need support. Preston provides that for her. He's content to let her shine, to support her career. That's rare in a man these days. What he meant was that Preston was content to live off Tiffany's success, to be the supporting player in her story. And maybe that was fine. Maybe that's what made them happy. But it wasn't how I'd raised my son. The wedding itself was beautiful. I'll give Tiffany that. She'd spared no expense, and every detail was perfect. Preston looked happy standing at that altar in his expensive tuxedo, and when Tiffany walked down the aisle in a dress that probably cost as much as a good truck, I saw genuine love in my son's eyes. I tried to be happy for him. I really did. But as I sat there watching them exchange vows, I kept thinking about Margaret, about how she would have felt about this woman Preston was marrying. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret would have seen something I was trying hard not to see. During the reception, I noticed Tiffany having an intense conversation with a group of men in expensive suits. Later, Preston told me they were her colleagues from Apex Development Group, including her boss, Marcus Hendricks. He was a smooth-talking man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of smile that showed too many teeth. "Bo Carter," Hendricks said when Preston introduced us. "Preston tells me you own a significant cattle ranch in Montana." "The Golden Horizon, is it?" "That's right. Beautiful country up there. Apex has been looking at opportunities in Montana. The state is ripe for development, especially with remote work becoming more common. High-net-worth individuals are looking for properties with privacy, natural beauty, and investment potential." "The ranch isn't for sale." Hendricks laughed. "Everything is for sale at the right price. But I respect a man who loves his land. Just keep us in mind if you ever change your mind. We pay top dollar for the right properties." I excused myself and found a quiet corner where I could watch the festivities without being drawn into more conversations about development and selling. That's when I overheard something that should have sent me running. Tiffany was talking to one of her bridesmaids, a woman who'd had too much champagne and was speaking louder than she probably intended. "So when do you get to see this famous ranch?" the bridesmaid asked. "Oh, we're going up for a week next month," Tiffany said. "Preston says it's rustic, but I'm sure we can make the best of it. Besides, I need to see the property in person before we make any final decisions." "Final decisions? About what to do with it?" "Preston says his father is getting older, not managing things as well as he used to. We'll probably need to step in sooner rather than later." The bridesmaid giggled. "You're already planning to take over?" "Not take over. Help. Preston is his only child, so eventually the ranch will be his anyway. We're just thinking ahead, making sure we're ready when the time comes." I sat there in that corner, cold spreading through my chest despite the warm room. Preston thought the ranch would be his. Of course he did. Why wouldn't he? His mother had owned it, and children inherit from their parents. It's the most natural assumption in the world. And I'd let him keep believing it, let him and his new wife make plans based on a reality that didn't exist. That night, back in my hotel room, I called James Thornton. It was late, but this couldn't wait. "James, I made a mistake. I should have told Preston about the trust before now. I've been telling you that for 2 years, Bo. I know. But I'm not ready to tell him yet. I need to be sure." "Sure of what?" "Sure that he and that wife of his aren't going to destroy everything Margaret and I built." I told him about the conversations I'd overheard, about Tiffany's boss and her interest in the ranch's development potential. James was quiet for a long moment. "Bo, the longer you wait, the worse this is going to be. Preston is making life decisions based on false assumptions. That's not fair to him. Life isn't fair. He's about to learn that lesson. Just be careful. And if you need me, call. Day or night." I promised I would, but I also made another decision that night. I would wait and watch. I would see what kind of people my son and his new wife really were. Because if they were the kind of people who deserved the Golden Horizon Ranch, who would protect it and honor it, then maybe I could find a way to transfer it to them eventually. But if they were the kind of people Margaret had feared, the kind who would subdivide and sell and destroy for profit, then I would do whatever it took to make sure that never happened. I just had no idea how ugly things were about to get. 1 month after the wedding, Preston and Tiffany drove up to Montana for their visit. I'd spent weeks getting the ranch ready, not because it needed work, but because I wanted them to see it at its best. The summer grass was green and thick, the cattle were healthy and sleek, and the ranch house looked like something out of a Western magazine, if I do say so myself. They arrived on a Friday afternoon in a brand-new Lexus SUV that looked ridiculously out of place bouncing up the dirt road to the main house. I was on the porch, waiting, trying to quiet the anxiety that had been building in my gut all week. Preston got out first, grinning. "Dad. God, I'd forgotten how beautiful it is up here." Tiffany emerged more slowly, looking around with an expression I couldn't quite read. She wore designer jeans that had probably never seen actual dirt and a white silk blouse that was completely impractical for ranch life. Her sunglasses were the kind that cost more than a month of groceries. "Welcome to the Golden Horizon," I said. "It's very remote," Tiffany said, not making it sound like a compliment. I showed them to their room, the same room Preston had grown up in, though I'd redecorated after Margaret died. Tiffany walked around it like she was inspecting a hotel room, checking the windows, testing the bed, examining the bathroom. "The water pressure is decent," she said, as if she was surprised. "And there's Wi-Fi? Satellite internet. It's not as fast as what you're used to in Denver, but it works." She nodded, already typing on her phone. "I'll need to take some calls this week. Work doesn't stop just because we're on vacation." Vacation. That's what she thought this was. That first evening, I cooked dinner for them, Margaret's recipe for pot roast with all the fixings. Preston ate like he'd been starving, reminiscing about growing up on the ranch, telling Tiffany stories about riding horses and helping with cattle drives. Tiffany listened with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, occasionally checking her phone under the table. I wanted to say something, to tell her it was rude, but I held my tongue. This was a test, I reminded myself. Watch and learn. After dinner, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. This had always been my favorite time of day, when the work was done and the land settled into evening quiet. Preston seemed to relax into it, his city tension easing away. But Tiffany couldn't sit still. "Beau, Preston mentioned that you've been running the ranch alone since Margaret passed. That must be incredibly difficult at your age." "I'm 65, not 90. And I have help. 2 full-time ranch hands, seasonal workers during busy times. Still, it's a lot of responsibility. Have you thought about what you want to do long-term? You can't keep doing this forever. I can do it for as long as I need to." "Of course," she said smoothly. "But it might make sense to start planning for the future. Preston and I have been talking, and we want to help. We could bring in professional management, modernize some of the operations, maybe diversify the revenue streams." There it was. Not even 24 hours, and she was already making plans for my ranch. The ranch doesn't need modernizing. It's profitable, sustainable, and operating exactly as it should be. "Oh, I didn't mean to imply it wasn't," Tiffany said quickly. "I just know there are opportunities to increase value. For instance, this property would be perfect for a luxury development. High-end vacation homes for wealthy buyers looking to escape the city. We could keep the ranch aesthetic, make it feel authentic while providing modern amenities. Apex has done similar projects that returned triple the initial investment." Preston shifted uncomfortably. "Tiff, maybe this isn't the time." "I'm just talking," she said, touching his arm. "Your father is a smart businessman. I'm sure he's thought about these things." "I've thought about them," I said, "and rejected them. This ranch is a working cattle operation, not a real estate development opportunity." "But why limit yourself?" Tiffany pressed. "The land is worth millions just sitting here. With development, it could be worth tens of millions. And you'd still own it, still control what happens." "We'd make sure of that." I stood up. "I think I'll call it a night. You two must be tired from the drive." That night, I lay in bed listening to them talk through the thin walls of the ranch house. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough. Too stubborn. His decision. He doesn't understand what he has. Need to be patient. How patient? We could be waiting years. I stopped trying to listen. I'd heard enough. The next morning, I took them on a tour of the ranch. We drove out in my old pickup truck, bouncing over dirt roads that hadn't changed in 40 years. I showed them the north pasture where we kept the breeding stock, the south range where we rotated the cattle through the summer, the creek that had never run dry even in the worst droughts. Preston asked questions about the operation, showed genuine interest. But Tiffany kept pulling out her phone, taking pictures, making notes. At one point, I saw her marking locations on a map app. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just documenting the property. It's beautiful. I want to remember it." That afternoon, while Preston was napping off the early morning wake-up, Tiffany asked if she could talk to me privately. We walked out to the barn, where I'd been planning to check on a mare that was due to foal any day. "Bo, I want to apologize if I came on too strong last night. I know this ranch means everything to you. It's your home, your life's work. I respect that. But," she smiled, "but I also see things from a different perspective. Preston is your only child. Eventually, this ranch will pass to him. That's just the natural order of things. And when it does, he's going to need help managing it. He's been away from ranch life for years. He wouldn't know where to start. If he inherits it, he'll figure it out. Or he'll sell it. That'll be his choice to make." "Sell it?" Tiffany looked shocked, though I suspected it was an act. "Why would he sell it? This is his heritage, his family legacy." "Because he's not a rancher. He never was. He's a city person now, and that's fine. Not everyone is meant for this life. But with proper management, Preston wouldn't have to be a rancher. He could be the owner, make the high-level decisions, while hired managers handle the day-to-day operations. And I could help with the business side, ensuring the property generates maximum value." "Maximum value," I repeated. "That's what this is about, isn't it? Not heritage or legacy. Value." "That's not fair," Tiffany said, and for the first time, I saw anger flash across her face before she controlled it. "I'm trying to help. I'm trying to make sure that when the time comes, Preston is ready. That you've set him up for success instead of burdening him with something he can't handle. Preston is my son. If there's any setting up to be done, I'll do it." "Are you sure about that?" Now the mask was slipping. "Because from what Preston tells me, you haven't exactly been preparing him for anything. You don't talk to him about the finances, about the operations, about your plans. You just expect him to figure it all out when you're gone. Preston doesn't ask. If he wanted to know about the ranch, really know about it, he'd be up here learning instead of building his life in Denver." Tiffany's eyes went cold. Maybe he didn't think he needed to learn because he trusted that his father would take care of things. That when the time came, you'd have set everything up properly. But now I'm wondering if that trust was misplaced. She walked away, leaving me standing in the barn with a sick feeling in my stomach. This woman was dangerous. She was smart, calculating, and she'd already convinced my son that she was looking out for his best interests. That evening at dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut. Preston kept trying to make conversation, but both Tiffany and I were locked in a silent battle, each of us smiling and polite while planning our next move. "Dad," Preston said finally, "Tiffany and I have been talking. We'd like to help out around here. Maybe take some of the burden off you." "What kind of help?" "Well, Tiffany has connections with some excellent property management firms. We could bring someone in to handle the day-to-day operations, give you a chance to relax, maybe even travel a bit. You've been working so hard since Mom died." "I don't need to relax. Work is what keeps me going." "But you shouldn't have to do it alone," Tiffany said. "Family takes care of family. We're family now." "Family," I repeated. "You've been family for 1 month." Preston's face fell. "Dad, that's not—" "I appreciate the offer," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "But I have the ranch under control. When I need help, I'll ask for it. The rest of their visit was strained. Preston tried to recapture the nostalgia of his childhood, riding horses and helping with chores, but Tiffany barely participated. She spent most of her time on her phone, taking calls and sending emails. On their last morning, I walked them out to their car. Preston hugged me, holding on a little longer than usual. "I'm worried about you, Dad. Out here all alone." "I'm not alone. I have the ranch, the hands, the community. I'm fine. But if you need anything, I'll call. I promise." Tiffany gave me a cool smile and a formal handshake. "Thank you for your hospitality, Beau. We'll be in touch." As I watched their Lexus disappear down the dirt road, kicking up dust in the morning sun, I felt a weight settle in my chest. I'd seen enough. I knew exactly what kind of person Tiffany was, and I knew what she wanted. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I called James Thornton that afternoon. "I need to make some changes to my financial arrangements," I told him. "What kind of changes?" "Preston has been receiving a monthly allowance from a trust account Margaret set up for him. $5,000 a month, automatically deposited. I want to give you control over that account. If I tell you to freeze it, I need you to be able to do it immediately." James was quiet for a moment. "Beau, what's going on?" I told him about the visit, about Tiffany's barely concealed interest in developing the ranch, about the conversations I'd overheard. "She's going to make a move, James. I don't know what or when, but it's coming. I need to be ready. If you freeze Preston's allowance, he's going to ask questions." "Good. Let him ask. Maybe it'll wake him up to what his wife really is. Or it'll push him further into her corner. People don't like being told their spouse is using them. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. Can you do what I'm asking?" "I can. But Beau, I'm telling you as your lawyer and your friend, this is a dangerous game you're playing. If you want to protect the ranch, the smart thing would be to tell Preston the truth now. Show him the trust documents, explain Margaret's decision, and make it clear that the ranch is not his to inherit. It would hurt, but at least it would be out in the open." "No, not yet. I need to see how this plays out." "Why? What are you hoping to accomplish?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I hoping for? That Preston would wake up and see Tiffany for what she was? That he'd leave her and come back to the ranch, suddenly transformed into the son I'd always hoped he'd be? Or was I just being a stubborn old man, holding on to control because letting go meant admitting that my family legacy was going to end with me? "I don't know," I admitted. "But I need more time." James sighed. "Okay. I'll set it up. But promise me something. If this situation gets worse, if you feel threatened in any way, you'll call me immediately." "I promise." After I hung up, I walked out to Margaret's grave. It was on a hill overlooking the ranch, marked by a simple granite headstone that read, "Margaret Whitmore Carter, beloved wife, mother, and guardian of the land, 1948 to 2020. I sat down on the bench I'd built next to the grave and spoke out loud, like I often did. "I think I made a mistake, Maggie. I should have told Preston from the start. Now it's gotten complicated, and I don't know how to fix it without making things worse." The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant rain. "That wife of his, she's trouble. You would have seen it immediately. She looks at the ranch and sees dollar signs. She looks at Preston and sees a path to those dollars. I don't think she loves him, not really. But he loves her, and that makes this whole thing a mess." I sat there for a long time, watching the sun move across the sky, waiting for some kind of answer that never came. Margaret wasn't going to give me guidance from beyond the grave. I was on my own with this one. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Preston called once, a brief conversation about nothing important. He didn't mention Tiffany, didn't mention the ranch, just asked how I was doing and told me he was busy with work. Then, exactly 3 weeks after their visit, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was having breakfast on the porch like I did every morning. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. The sun was just clearing the mountains, painting everything in gold and orange light. That's when I saw the car coming up the road. Not Preston's Lexus, but a black Mercedes sedan that looked like it cost more than most houses. It pulled up in front of the ranch house, and 3 people got out. Tiffany emerged first, wearing a business suit that was completely wrong for a ranch. Behind her came a nervous-looking man carrying a leather briefcase, and an older woman I didn't recognize. "Bo!" Tiffany called out, her voice artificially bright. "I hope we're not interrupting your breakfast." I set down my coffee cup slowly. "You drove 5 hours from Denver. I doubt this is a social call." "No, it's not." She walked up the porch steps, the other 2 following. "This is Dennis Morrison, he's a notary public. And this is Helen Blackwood, she's a senior care consultant." Every alarm bell in my head started ringing at once. "What's going on, Tiffany? Can we talk inside? This is important." Against my better judgment, I led them into the living room. Tiffany sat on the couch like she owned it, while Dennis the notary and Helen the consultant remained standing awkwardly by the door. "Bo, Preston and I have been very worried about you," Tiffany began. "Living out here alone at your age, managing such a large property. It's too much for one person." "I've managed fine for 2 years." "Have you?" Tiffany pulled out her phone and started scrolling through photos. When we visited, I noticed several safety hazards. Loose steps on the porch, faulty wiring in the barn, broken fencing in the north pasture. Any one of those things could lead to a serious accident. Those are all on my list to repair. That's how ranching works. There's always something that needs fixing. But what if you get hurt? You're out here alone, miles from the nearest hospital. What if you fall, or have a heart attack, or... I'm 65 years old and in perfect health. I'm not planning on falling or having a heart attack. Tiffany's smile tightened. None of us plan for those things. That's why we need to plan ahead. Helen here specializes in senior living transitions. She's identified some excellent facilities that would be perfect for you. Assisted living communities where you'd have support, medical care on site, activities, social opportunities. You want to put me in a nursing home. Not a nursing home, Helen interjected quickly. These are luxury senior living communities. You'd have your own apartment, independence, but with the security of knowing help is available if you need it. I stood up. Get out. Bo, please listen, Tiffany started. I said get out. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere. Tiffany's expression changed. The fake concern vanished, replaced by cold calculation. Actually, Bo, that's what we need to discuss. You see, Preston is concerned that you're not capable of managing the ranch anymore. As his inheritance, the property is too valuable to risk losing because of negligence or incapacity. Preston's inheritance, I repeated slowly. Is that what he thinks this is? Of course. Margaret was his mother. When she died, her estate naturally passed to her son. That's how inheritance works. And Preston sent you here to tell me that? For the first time, Tiffany hesitated. Preston doesn't know we're here. He has trouble with confrontation. He doesn't like hurting people's feelings. But someone has to make the hard decisions, and I'm willing to be that person. How noble of you. I'm trying to help, Tiffany snapped. You're being stubborn and foolish. We're offering you a comfortable place to live where you'll be taken care of. All you have to do is sign over management of the ranch to Preston. You can still visit, still be involved, but the day-to-day responsibility will be his. Let me make something very clear, I said, my voice low and dangerous. This ranch is mine, not Preston's. Mine. And I'm not signing anything, I'm not going anywhere, and if you ever show up on my property uninvited again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Tiffany stood up, her face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake. A huge mistake. We're trying to do this the easy way, but there are other options. Is that a threat? It's a fact. If you're declared mentally incompetent, Preston can petition for conservatorship. He's your next of kin. A judge would grant him legal authority to make decisions on your behalf. I'm not mentally incompetent. Are you sure about that? Because from where I'm standing, refusing help when you clearly need it, living alone in dangerous conditions, that could easily be interpreted as diminished capacity. Dennis the notary cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ms. Westbrook, I don't think. Be quiet, Dennis. Tiffany didn't take her eyes off me. Bo, I'm going to give you 1 week to think about this. 1 week to come to your senses. After that, we'll be filing a petition for emergency conservatorship based on your inability to care for yourself and your property. We have documentation, photographs, testimony from medical professionals. Medical professionals? I haven't seen a doctor in months. Doctor. Richard Westbrook has extensive experience in geriatric care. His professional opinion will carry a lot of weight with a judge. Your father. You're going to have your father, who's never met me, declare me mentally incompetent. Tiffany smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. Family looks out for family. That's what you said, isn't it? We're just looking out for you. She walked to the door, then turned back. 1 week, Bo. Think carefully about your decision. Because after that week, the choice won't be yours anymore. They left, and I stood in my living room feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I should have seen this coming. I should have anticipated that Tiffany would make a move. But I'd underestimated her ruthlessness, her willingness to destroy an old man's life to get what she wanted. I called James Thornton immediately. She just threatened to have me declared incompetent and put in a nursing home so Preston can take over the ranch. Slow down. Tell me exactly what happened. I told him everything, from the surprise visit to the threats to her father's involvement. When I finished, James was quiet for a long moment. This is worse than I thought. Bo, she's not bluffing. If she's got her father willing to sign off on a mental competency evaluation, and if she can document any unsafe conditions on the property, she might actually have a case. I'm not incompetent. I know that, and you know that, but in court, it's about what we can prove. We need to get ahead of this. I want you to see a doctor immediately, get a full physical and mental health evaluation. We need documentation that you're healthy and competent. Fine. What else? Fix everything on the property that could be considered a safety hazard. Document everything with dated photos. And Bo, I think it's time to tell Preston the truth. Show him the trust documents. Make it clear that the ranch is not his inheritance and never was. That'll pull the rug out from under Tiffany's entire scheme. But I wasn't ready for that yet. No. If I tell Preston now, it'll look like I'm doing it out of spite, like I'm punishing him for Tiffany's actions. I need him to see what she really is first. How are you going to do that? An idea was forming in my mind, dark and risky, but it might just work. I'm going to give her exactly what she thinks she wants. I don't like the sound of that. I'm going to let Preston think he's inheriting the ranch. I'm going to let Tiffany think she's one. And then I'm going to watch what they do with it. Bo, that's brilliant or insane, I know. But it's the only way. If Preston is going to destroy his mother's legacy for quick money, if he's going to let Tiffany subdivide and develop this land, then I need to know. And he needs to know what kind of person he married. And what if he does exactly that? What if they start the process of selling or developing the ranch? Then I'll stop them. But at least Preston will have shown his true colors. He'll have proven that Margaret was right to leave the ranch to me instead of him. James sighed. This is the worst plan I've ever heard. But if you're determined to do it, we need to be smart. First, document everything. Every conversation, every threat, every action they take. Second, freeze Preston's allowance. If money is what's driving this, let's see how they react when it dries up. Third, and this is non-negotiable, you need to have an exit strategy. If things go wrong, if they actually manage to get a conservatorship hearing, we need to be ready to produce the trust documents and prove ownership immediately. Agreed. And Bo, be careful. Tiffany is dangerous. She's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. Over the next week, I followed James's instructions to the letter. I saw my doctor, Dr. Patricia Chen, who'd been my physician for 20 years. She ran every test imaginable and declared me in excellent health for my age, both physically and mentally. I got it all documented, signed, and sealed. I fixed every potential safety hazard on the property, no matter how minor. Loose step, repaired and reinforced. Questionable wiring, brought in an electrician. Broken fence, fixed and photographed. By the end of the week, the Golden Horizon Ranch was in perfect condition, and I called James to freeze Preston's allowance. "Are you sure?" James asked. "This is going to cause immediate blowback." "I'm counting on it. Let's see what they do when the money stops flowing." The reaction came faster than I expected. 3 days after the allowance was frozen, Preston called me. He sounded stressed, confused. "Dad, there's some kind of problem with my account. The automatic deposit from Mom's trust didn't come through this month." "That's because I had it stopped." Silence. "Then, you had it stopped?" "Why?" "Because I think you and Tiffany need to learn to live on what you earn, not what you expect to inherit." "I don't understand. That money was from Mom. It was her gift to me. It was an allowance I've been providing since her death. It's not an inheritance, Preston. It's a gift that I can give or withhold as I choose." "Since when do you control Mom's money?" "The trust." "The trust is none of your concern. What is your concern is that you're 35 years old, and it's time to stand on your own 2 feet. Is this because of Tiffany?" Preston's voice rose. "Did she say something to upset you? I know she can be direct, but she means well." "Preston, your wife showed up at my home with a notary and a senior care consultant and tried to force me into a nursing home so she could take over the ranch." "Did you know about that?" More silence. Longer this time. She mentioned that she was worried about you. That maybe you needed help. But I didn't know she was going to. I didn't authorize." "Did you tell her the ranch was your inheritance?" "Well, yes, I assumed Mom owned it, and I'm her son, so naturally." "Never assume, Preston. It makes an ass out of you and me both." I regretted the harshness as soon as I said it, but I was too angry to take it back. "The allowance stays frozen until further notice. You and Tiffany are on your own." I hung up before he could respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, hearing the hurt and confusion in Preston's voice. He really hadn't known what Tiffany was planning. But he'd also assumed the ranch was his, had told his wife it was his, and that assumption had led to this whole mess. 2 days later, I got a registered letter. Inside was a formal notice that Preston Carter, as next of kin and concerned family member, was petitioning the Millbrook County Court for an emergency conservatorship hearing regarding Bo Carter, age 65, based on evidence of diminished mental capacity and inability to safely manage his property and affairs. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from the date of the letter. Tiffany wasn't bluffing. She was actually doing this. I called James immediately. "She's filed for conservatorship." I saw. The court clerk called me this morning. "Bo, this is serious. Even with your medical documentation, if they can make a case that you're acting irrationally, cutting off Preston's money, refusing help, isolating yourself, a judge might grant the conservatorship." "What do we do?" "We fight. I'll file a response denying the petition, and we'll present our evidence at the hearing. But Bo, I strongly recommend you tell Preston the truth now. If he knows the ranch isn't his, he'll have no standing to claim conservatorship over it." "Not yet. I want to see if he goes through with this." "He's going through with it. The petition has been filed. By Tiffany, through lawyers she probably hired. I want to see if Preston actually shows up at that hearing. I want to know if my son is really willing to have his father declared incompetent and stripped of his rights. And if he does, then I'll know exactly where I stand with him. And I'll produce the trust documents and end this farce." The 3 weeks before the hearing were the longest of my life. I threw myself into ranch work, pushing myself harder than I had in years. The physical exhaustion helped keep the anxiety at bay, though it didn't stop the constant worry gnawing at my gut. Preston called several times, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet, wasn't ready to hear his justifications or excuses. Each voicemail he left sounded more desperate, more confused. "Dad, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Dad, I don't understand what's happening. Tiffany says this conservatorship is for your own good, but I need to hear it from you. Dad, I'm scared. I'm scared I'm losing you. Please, just talk to me." That last message almost broke me. But I stayed strong. This wasn't about hurting Preston. It was about protecting the ranch, honoring Margaret's wishes, and yes, maybe teaching my son a hard lesson about the woman he'd married. The day before the hearing, James came up to the ranch with a thick folder of documents. "This is everything we need," he said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. Medical evaluations, financial records, property maintenance reports, character statements from your ranch hands and neighbors, and the trust documents as our nuclear option. "We're going to win this, Bo. Will Preston be there?" According to the petition, he's listed as the primary concerned party, so yes, he should be present. "And Tiffany?" "Undoubtedly. This is her show." I looked at the documents spread across the table, 40 years of life reduced to evidence in a legal proceeding. How did it come to this, James? How did I end up in court fighting my own son? You're not fighting your son. You're fighting a woman who's manipulated him into thinking he's doing the right thing. Preston doesn't want to hurt you, Bo. He's been led to believe that this conservatorship is in your best interest. Then why hasn't he called me himself instead of leaving voicemails? Why hasn't he driven up here to talk to me face to face? James didn't have an answer for that. That night, I sat on the porch watching the stars, thinking about Margaret, about Preston, about the choices that had led to this moment. I thought about that decision on Preston's wedding day to keep quiet about the inheritance. Had that been wisdom or cowardice? Pride or protection? Tomorrow I'd find out if it had all been worth it. The Millbrook County Courthouse was a 2-hour drive from the ranch, an old brick building that had served the community for over a century. I arrived early with James, both of us dressed in suits that felt stiff and uncomfortable after days in ranch clothes. Preston and Tiffany were already there, sitting on a bench in the hallway outside the courtroom. Preston looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed. When he saw me, he stood up like he wanted to approach, but Tiffany grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. She looked immaculate in a charcoal gray suit, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She met my eyes with a cold smile that said she thought she'd already won. "Bo," James said quietly, "don't engage with them. Let's just get through this." We sat on a bench on the opposite side of the hallway. The minutes ticked by in tense silence. Finally, the bailiff called us into the courtroom. Judge Martha Hendricks presided, a stern woman in her 60s who I'd seen around town but never met personally. She looked over her glasses at the assembled parties with an expression that suggested she didn't suffer fools gladly. "We're here for the matter of the conservatorship petition filed by Preston Carter regarding his father, Bo Carter. Let me be clear from the outset. Conservatorship is a serious step that strips an individual of fundamental rights. This court does not grant such petitions lightly. Mr. Morrison, you're representing the petitioner." A slick-looking lawyer in an expensive suit stood up. This was not Dennis the notary. This was professional muscle, the kind of attorney who cost $500 an hour. "Yes, Your Honor. Daniel Morrison, representing Preston Carter." Of course. Same last name as Dennis the notary. Probably related. Tiffany had planned this carefully. "Mr. Thornton, you're representing the respondent?" James stood. "Yes, Your Honor. James Thornton, representing Bo Carter." "Very well. Mr. Morrison, present your case." What followed was one of the most surreal hours of my life. Morrison painted a picture of me as a confused, possibly delusional old man living in dangerous conditions, refusing help, making irrational financial decisions, and potentially suffering from early-stage dementia. He presented photographs of the ranch that must have been taken during Preston and Tiffany's visit, showing things out of context. A loose fence board made to look like catastrophic neglect, a cluttered workshop presented as evidence of disorganization and confusion. Then he called his first witness, Richard Westbrook, Tiffany's father. Dr. Westbrook took the stand looking every bit the respected medical professional. Morrison walked him through his credentials: 30 years as a geriatric psychiatrist, hundreds of competency evaluations, expert testimony in numerous cases. Dr. Westbrook, have you had an opportunity to review the materials regarding Beau Carter? I have. Photographs of his living conditions, accounts of his recent behavior, and medical history provided by the family. And based on this review, have you formed a professional opinion regarding Mr. Carter's mental competency? I have significant concerns. The isolation, the refusal of help from family, the sudden irrational decision to cut off financial support to his son without explanation, these are all potential indicators of diminished capacity. Additionally, Mr. Carter's age and recent loss of his spouse create risk factors for cognitive decline. In your professional opinion, would Mr. Carter benefit from a conservatorship arrangement? I believe he would. A conservatorship would ensure he receives proper care and that his financial interests are protected while he undergoes a comprehensive mental health evaluation. James stood for cross-examination, and I saw the glint in his eye that told me he was about to destroy this testimony. Dr. Westbrook, you said you reviewed materials about Mr. Carter. Have you ever actually met him? No, but in my profession. Yes or no, doctor? Have you ever met, spoken to, or examined Beau Carter in any way? No. Have you reviewed his actual medical records, as opposed to a family-provided medical history? I was not given access to. Yes or no? No. So you're offering an expert opinion on the mental capacity of a man you've never met, based entirely on photographs and hearsay provided by interested parties. Is that correct? Dr. Westbrook's face reddened. I'm basing my opinion on established professional standards. Your Honor, James said, I move to strike this entire testimony as lacking foundation. Dr. Westbrook has not examined the respondent, has not reviewed actual medical records, and is basing his opinion solely on biased, second-hand information provided by his own daughter, who has a direct financial interest in this proceeding. Judge Hendricks nodded slowly. Motion granted. The court will disregard Dr. Westbrook's testimony. Mr. Morrison, I hope you have more substantial evidence than this. Morrison looked shaken but pressed on. He called Tiffany to the stand. She testified about the visit to the ranch, describing it in terms that made me sound like I was living in squalor and danger. She spoke with apparent concern about my isolation, my refusal to accept help, my aggressive response when they tried to talk to me about senior living options. Mrs. Carter, Morrison said, in your professional experience in real estate development, how would you assess the management of the Golden Horizon Ranch? Objection, James said. Mrs. Carter's expertise in real estate development has no bearing on her father-in-law's mental capacity. Your Honor, I'm trying to establish that Mr. Carter is failing to properly maintain a valuable asset, which demonstrates impaired judgment. I'll allow it, but make your point quickly, Mr. Morrison. Tiffany continued. The ranch is being mismanaged. Fences are in disrepair, buildings are deteriorating, and opportunities for revenue generation are being ignored. From a business perspective, allowing such a valuable property to decline suggests poor judgment or inability to manage complex affairs. And you've tried to help? We've offered multiple times to bring in professional management, but Mr. Carter refuses all assistance. He's cut off Preston's financial support out of spite, punishing his son for caring about his welfare. James stood for cross-examination, and this time his expression was pure predatory focus. Mrs. Carter, you testified that you work in real estate development, correct? Yes. For Apex Development Group? That's correct. And Apex specializes in what kind of developments? Luxury residential and resort properties. Have you ever discussed developing the Golden Horizon Ranch with your employers at Apex? Tiffany hesitated. We've had preliminary conversations about the property's potential. Preliminary conversations. Before or after you married Preston? I don't see how that's relevant. Please answer the question. Before. But that was just professional interest in the property. James pulled out a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence an email chain between Tiffany Westbrook and Marcus Hendricks, her boss at Apex Development Group. Mrs. Carter, would you like to read the date on these emails? Tiffany went pale. I'm not sure. Let me help you. These emails are from 8 months ago, for months before you met Preston Carter. In them, you discussed the Golden Horizon Ranch specifically, noting that it would be a prime acquisition target, and that you were developing a strategy to gain access to the property. Would you like to explain what you meant by gaining access? Morrison jumped up. Objection. This is outside the scope of. Overruled, Judge Hendricks said sharply. I want to hear this answer. Mrs. Carter. Tiffany's composure was cracking. That was just, we were brainstorming potential properties. I didn't even know Preston then. Really? Because the next email in the chain, sent 2 weeks later, mentions that you'd made contact with the owner's son, and that he was receptive and potentially useful. Mrs. Carter, did you target Preston specifically because he was the heir to a property your company wanted to develop? No. I fell in love with Preston. The ranch had nothing to do with. Then why, at your wedding, did you tell your bridesmaid that you'd be making final decisions about the property soon? Why did you visit Bo Carter 1 week after your wedding with a notary and try to force him into a nursing home? Why are you pushing for this conservatorship? Tiffany was silent, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. I'll tell you why, James continued. Because you married Preston to get access to the Golden Horizon Ranch. You thought he was the heir, thought you could manipulate him into selling or developing the property, and now that Bo has cut off the money and refused to cooperate, you're trying to remove him from the picture entirely. This isn't about protecting a confused old man. This is about greed. That's not true, Tiffany shouted. Preston is the rightful heir. His mother owned that ranch, and it should go to him. Your Honor, James said calmly, I think Mrs. Carter has just revealed the true motivation behind this petition. She wants control of property she believes Preston will inherit. The problem is, her belief is completely wrong. Judge Hendricks leaned forward. Mr. Thornton, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that this entire proceeding is based on a false premise. Preston Carter is not the heir to the Golden Horizon Ranch. He never was. The courtroom erupted. Morrison was shouting objections. Tiffany was staring at me with pure hatred. And Preston, poor Preston, looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Order. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. Mr. Thornton, explain yourself. Your Honor, may I call Bo Carter to the stand? I stood and walked to the witness stand, my legs feeling weak but my resolve solid. I'd been dreading this moment and longing for it at the same time. The moment when everything would come out. James walked me through the basics. My marriage to Margaret, the history of the ranch, Thomas Whitmore's trust, and then the crucial part. Mr. Carter, who currently owns the Golden Horizon Ranch? I do. My wife Margaret inherited it from her father's trust, and she left it to me when she died. It's held in a trust that I control, protected from sale or development without specific conditions being met. The courtroom was dead silent. And Preston knew this? No. I never told him. His mother wanted to wait until after her death to explain, but I kept putting it off. Why? I looked at Preston, saw the betrayal and confusion in his eyes. Because I wanted to see what kind of man my son had become. I wanted to know if he would do the right thing with the ranch or if he'd sell it for quick money. Margaret worried about that, worried that Preston didn't understand what the ranch represented. And has Preston demonstrated what he'd do with the ranch? I looked at Tiffany, saw the fury in her expression. Not Preston. His wife. She's been planning to develop this ranch from before she even met my son. She married him to get access to property she thought he'd inherit. And when I wouldn't cooperate, she tried to have me declared incompetent. Morrison was on his feet. Your Honor, This is all speculation and— "Sit down, Mr. Morrison," Judge Hendricks said coldly. "Mr. Thornton, do you have documentation supporting Mr. Carter's ownership of the ranch?" "I do, Your Honor. The complete trust documents, Margaret Carter's will, and the deed transfer. I can provide copies to the court." Judge Hendricks held out her hand, and James supplied the documents. She reviewed them silently while the courtroom waited. Finally, she looked up. "These documents appear to be in order. Mr. Morrison, your client has filed a conservatorship petition seeking to manage property he doesn't have any legal right to. Do you have anything to say?" Morrison looked at Preston, at Tiffany, and I could see the moment he realized he'd been used. "Your Honor, and my client was under the impression that he was the heir to his mother's estate. If that's not the case, then obviously the petition lacks standing." "Obviously," Judge Hendricks said dryly. "This petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm deeply troubled by what I've heard today. Mrs. Carter, if even half of what's been suggested is true, you've attempted to defraud an elderly man out of his property through manipulation and abuse of the legal system. I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation." Tiffany stood up. "You can't. This is ridiculous. Preston is entitled to that property. His mother made her wishes clear in legal documents. Those wishes are not subject to your approval or Preston's expectations. This hearing is concluded." The gavel came down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. As people filed out of the courtroom, I sat in the witness stand, suddenly exhausted. Preston was standing in the aisle, staring at me with a look that broke my heart. Tiffany was already gone, storming out with Morrison trailing behind her, probably trying to figure out how to avoid an ethics complaint. Finally, Preston walked over. "Dad, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to know, Preston. I needed to know what you'd do if you thought the ranch was yours." "And what did you learn?" I climbed down from the stand, my knees protesting. "I learned that your wife is a manipulative fraud who married you for money and property. And I learned that you were willing to have your own father declared incompetent based on her lies." "I didn't know they were lies. I thought you were in trouble, thought you needed help." "Did you? Or did you see an opportunity to get control of the ranch early? To start cashing in on your inheritance?" Preston's face crumpled. "Is that really what you think of me? That I'd do that?" Looking at my son's devastated face, I felt the anger drain out of me, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. "I don't know anymore, Preston. I don't know what you do or who you've become. You didn't visit after your mother died. You didn't call to check on the ranch. You married a woman you barely knew, and within weeks she was trying to force me out of my home. What am I supposed to think? I was trying to give you space to grieve. I thought you needed time alone. And Tiffany, she told me she was worried about you, that she wanted to help. I believed her. Of course you did. You loved her. Maybe you still do. But Preston, she used you. She researched the ranch, found out you were Margaret's son, and targeted you specifically. Those emails James presented? They prove it. She never loved you. She loved what she thought you could give her." Preston's legs seemed to give out, and he sat down heavily on the courtroom bench. 8 months ago. She knew about the ranch 8 months before we met. That means our whole relationship. I'm sorry, son. I truly am. Why didn't you just tell me? Before the wedding, after the wedding, any time. Why did you let this happen? I sat down beside him. Because I'm a stubborn old fool who wanted to teach you a lesson. I wanted you to see what Tiffany really was. I wanted you to prove that you deserved the ranch, that you understood its value beyond money. Instead, I've made everything worse. I've hurt you, damaged our relationship, and I don't know if we can fix it. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Preston said, "She told me the allowance Mom left me came from her trust. She said it was my inheritance being distributed over time. It was money I was giving you from the ranch profits. I thought you needed help getting established in Denver." $5,000 a month for 2 years. That's $120,000. And I just spent it. On rent, on clothes, on impressing Tiffany and her friends. I didn't save any of it. I didn't invest it. I just assumed it would keep coming forever. He laughed bitterly. God, I'm such an idiot. You're not an idiot. You trusted the wrong person. No, Dad. I'm an idiot. I've been an idiot for years. I left the ranch as soon as I could, barely stayed in touch, never bothered to learn about the business or the property. I just assumed it would all be there waiting for me when you died, like some kind of inheritance lottery. I didn't think about what it meant to Mom, what it meant to you. I only thought about what it could mean to me. I didn't argue with him because he was right. That was the hard truth we both needed to face. What do I do now? Preston asked. My wife is probably going to be investigated for fraud. My marriage is based on a lie. I'm broke because I've been living beyond my means, expecting money that was never really mine. I don't even know where to start fixing this mess. You start by making a choice. Do you love Tiffany, or do you love what she pretended to be? Preston thought about that for a long time. I don't know. I thought I knew her, but now, how do I know what was real and what was manipulation? You'll figure it out. But Preston, whatever you decide about your marriage, you need to understand something. The ranch is mine. It will be mine until I die. After that, who knows? Maybe I'll leave it to you if you prove you can appreciate it for what it really is. Maybe I'll leave it to someone else who understands the legacy. Maybe I'll donate it to a conservation trust. But it's not yours to count on, and it's not yours to plan around. I understand. Preston stood up. I should go. Tiffany's probably at the car, and we need to talk. Really talk, for the first time maybe. Preston. I stood and put my hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens, you're still my son. I love you. I'm angry and disappointed, but I love you. That hasn't changed. His eyes filled with tears. I love you too, Dad. And I'm sorry. For all of it. I watched him walk out of the courtroom, his shoulders slumped, looking more lost than I'd ever seen him. James came over and put a hand on my shoulder. That was hard to watch. Necessary, though. He needed to hear it. What now? Now I go home and get back to work. The ranch doesn't run itself. But as we walked out of the courthouse into the bright Montana afternoon, I knew things were far from over. Tiffany had lost this battle, but I didn't think she was the type to accept defeat gracefully. And Preston was caught in the middle, torn between a wife who'd betrayed him and a father who'd kept devastating secrets. I'd won in court today, but I had a feeling the real fight was just beginning. The drive back to the ranch was quiet. James tried to make conversation a few times, but I wasn't in the mood to talk. My mind kept replaying Preston's face in the courtroom, the look of devastation when he realized his entire marriage had been built on lies. When we reached the ranch, James helped me gather the documents from his car. Bo, I need to ask you something. What are you going to do about Preston's allowance? Keep it frozen. He was right. He needs to learn to stand on his own feet. And if he can't? If he's been living beyond his means and can't make rent? Then he'll have to make hard choices. Sell the luxury car, move to a cheaper apartment, get a better job. That's what adults do when they've been irresponsible with money. James sighed. You're a harder man than I am. I'm the man Margaret and Thomas Whitmore made me. They taught me that nothing worth having comes easy, that responsibility and respect are earned, not given. Preston needs to learn that lesson, even if it hurts. After James left, I sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. The ranch hands had taken care of the evening feeding, and everything was quiet except for the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the grass. My phone rang. Preston. Dad, we need to talk. I thought you were talking to Tiffany. I was. It didn't go well. His voice was strained. Can I come up to the ranch? I need some time away from Denver, away from her. I need to clear my head. I should have said no. I should have told him to figure out his marriage on his own. But he was my son, and he sounded broken. Come on up. Your room is still here. Thank you. I'll drive up tomorrow. He paused. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. I know, son. I'll see you tomorrow. Preston arrived the next afternoon, driving a rental car. His Lexus was probably in Tiffany's name, I realized. Just another thing he'd been living with that wasn't really his. He looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled clothes, eyes that hadn't seen much sleep. But when he stepped out of the car and looked around at the ranch, something in his expression softened. I'd forgotten how beautiful it is here. It's always been beautiful. You just stopped looking. We didn't talk much that first day. I showed him to his old room, gave him space to settle in. At dinner, we sat at the kitchen table eating the stew I'd made, and the silence between us wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. Tell me about the ranch, Preston said finally. Not the business side. I mean, tell me about it. Why did Grandpa Thomas love this place so much? Why did Mom? Why do you? So I told him. I told him about Thomas Whitmore's father buying the land in 1952, when it was nothing but raw prairie. I told him about the work it took to build it into something productive. The drought survived, the hard winters endured. I told him about Margaret learning to ride before she could walk, about her refusing to leave for college because she couldn't bear to be away from the land. Your mother used to ride out to the North Ridge every Sunday morning, I said. She'd sit there for an hour, just looking at the mountains and the grassland. She said it reminded her why all the hard work mattered. She said this land wasn't just property, it was a responsibility. A trust passed down from her father, and someday to be passed down to someone who would protect it. But not to me. Not to the you that you've been. But maybe to the you that you could be. Preston looked up at that. What do you mean? I mean it's not too late, Preston. It's not too late to learn, to understand, to become someone who deserves this legacy. But it won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. I don't even know where to start. You start by showing up, by working, by learning, by proving that this place matters to you as more than just a dollar value. Preston nodded slowly. Can I stay for a while? Not just a few days. Really stay, help out, learn the business. What about Tiffany? I don't know. I need time to figure that out. But I know I can't go back to Denver right now. I can't face her, can't face the apartment we shared, can't pretend our life together wasn't a complete lie. You can stay as long as you need to. But if you're here, you work. Real work, not just playing cowboy for a week. Deal. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. Preston threw himself into ranch life with an intensity I'd never seen from him before. He was up before dawn, working alongside the ranch hands, learning everything from mending fences to vaccinating cattle. His hands blistered, his muscles ached, and he complained good-naturedly about the smell and the early mornings. But he showed up every day. I watched him carefully, looking for signs that this was just another phase, another performance. But as days turned into weeks, I saw something change in him. He started asking questions about more than just the daily tasks. He wanted to understand the business decisions, the long-term planning, the balance between profitability and sustainability. One evening, we were sitting on the porch after a long day, and Preston said, I talked to Tiffany today. How did that go? Badly. She's angry that I'm up here hiding, as she put it. She wants me to come back to Denver, says we need to work on our marriage. What do you want? Preston was quiet for a long time. I want to understand why I was so blind. I keep going over our relationship in my head, looking for the signs I missed. And they were there, Dad. So many of them. The way she always brought conversations back to money and property. The way she pushed me to talk about the ranch constantly. The way she got upset when I suggested we live on less and save more. I just didn't want to see it. Love makes us blind sometimes. Especially when it's what we think love should be rather than what it really is. Did you love Mom right away? No, I admitted. At first I was just attracted to her. She was beautiful and smart and way out of my league. But love? That came later, after I'd seen her deal with a difficult foaling at 2 in the morning, after I'd watched her stand up to her father about our relationship, after I'd seen her cry over a horse she couldn't save. Love came when I knew her, really knew her, not just the version of her I wanted to see. I don't think I ever really knew Tiffany. I knew the person she presented to me, but not who she actually was. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know yet. Part of me thinks I should try to save the marriage, that I made vows and I should honor them. But another part knows that those vows were made under false pretenses. She married me for the wrong reasons. Whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not because of what you think you're supposed to do. Meanwhile, my lawyer James called with disturbing news. Bo, the district attorney's office has finished their preliminary investigation into Tiffany Westbrook. And they don't have enough to charge her with fraud. The emails suggesting she targeted Preston are circumstantial. She can claim she fell in love with him regardless of her initial interest in the ranch. The conservatorship petition, while ethically questionable, isn't technically illegal if she genuinely believed you were incompetent. So she gets away with it. Legally, yes. But there's more. I've been hearing things through the legal community. Tiffany has been talking to her bosses at Apex Development Group. They're still very interested in the Golden Horizon Ranch. They can be interested all they want. The ranch isn't for sale. I know. But Bo, I think you need to be careful. These development companies, when they want something badly enough, they can get creative. They'll look for any angle, any leverage. What kind of leverage could they possibly have? I don't know. But I'd keep my eyes open. James's warning proved prophetic sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the county assessor's office. There was a question about my property taxes. Could I come in to discuss it? I drove into town the next day, bringing Preston with me. The assessor, a nervous man named Harold Benson, laid out a stack of papers on his desk. Mr. Carter, we've received a challenge to your property tax assessment. A company called Mountain Westland Trust is claiming that the Golden Horizon Ranch is improperly classified as agricultural land and should be reassessed at a much higher rate. That's ridiculous. It's a working cattle ranch. It's been classified as agricultural land for 70 years. I understand, but they're arguing that because you're not actively developing or maximizing the land's potential value, it should be taxed at its highest and best use value, which would be residential development. Who's behind this Mountain Westland Trust? Harold shifted uncomfortably. I can't say for certain, but the attorney representing them is from the same firm that represents Apex Development Group. Preston, who'd been quiet until then, spoke up. This is Tiffany. She's trying to force Dad to sell by making it too expensive to keep the ranch. If the reassessment goes through, Harold said, your annual property taxes would increase from about $45,000 to potentially $500,000 or more. I don't know any cattle operation that could sustain that kind of tax burden. I felt cold spreading through my chest. It was brilliant, in a cruel way. If she couldn't get the ranch through manipulation or conservatorship, she'd make it financially impossible for me to keep it. Force me to sell, and Apex would be waiting with an offer. Can they do this? Preston asked. They can challenge the assessment, Harold said. Whether they'll win is another matter. But it'll require a hearing, legal representation, and even if you win, defending against it will be expensive. James, when I called him, was grim. This is a legal mugging. They're trying to bury you in legal fees and tax liability until you have no choice but to sell. How much will it cost to fight this? Conservatively, $50,000 in legal fees, maybe more depending on how long it drags out. Plus you'll need expert witnesses to testify about agricultural land values, proper tax classification, the economic viability of the ranch operation. And if I lose? If you lose, you're looking at back taxes for potentially several years, penalties, and the ongoing higher assessment. It could easily run into millions of dollars. That night, Preston and I sat in the ranch office going over the numbers. The ranch was profitable, but not hugely so. After operating expenses, maintenance, payroll for the ranch hands, and normal property taxes, there was enough left over to provide me a comfortable living and build up some reserves. But not enough to fight a protracted legal battle and pay massively increased taxes. We could take out a loan against the ranch, Preston suggested. And risk losing it entirely if we can't pay back the loan? No. That's exactly what they want, to force me into debt and then swoop in when I default. There has to be something we can do. I looked at the financial statements spread across the desk, then at my son's earnest face. He'd changed so much in the past month. The soft city kid who'd arrived in rental car was gone, replaced by someone who'd rediscovered calluses and early mornings. Someone who was starting to understand what it meant to fight for something. Preston, I need to ask you something. If I were to lose this ranch, if Tiffany and Apex somehow managed to take it, what would you do? He didn't hesitate. Fight them with everything I have. Even if it meant going against Tiffany? Even if it meant divorce? Especially if it meant divorce. Dad, these past weeks have opened my eyes. Not just about Tiffany, but about what really matters. I was so focused on making money, on impressing people, on living some version of success that I saw in magazines and on social media. But it was all empty. Working on this ranch, understanding what you and Mom built, what Grandpa Thomas built, that's real. That matters. And I won't let them destroy it. Something in my chest loosened, a knot of tension I'd been carrying for years. Okay then. We fight. How? I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out together. The next morning, I got a call that changed everything. It was a reporter from the Millbrook County Gazette, a woman named Sarah Mitchell. Mr. Carter, I'm working on a story about land development pressures on Montana ranches. Your name came up in connection with a tax assessment challenge. Would you be willing to talk to me? I thought about it for about 2 seconds. Yes. Yes, I would. Sarah came out to the ranch that afternoon, a young woman with sharp eyes and a digital recorder. I told her everything, about Tiffany's manipulation, the conservatorship hearing, the emails proving she'd targeted Preston, and now this tax assessment challenge that was clearly designed to force a sale. This is quite a story, Sarah said when I finished. Do you have documentation for all of this? I have court transcripts, emails that were entered into evidence, and tax assessment documents. It's all public record. And you're willing to go on the record with all of this? Absolutely. I'm done playing defense. It's time people know what Apex Development Group and people like Tiffany Westbrook are willing to do to get what they want. The story ran 4 days later, on the front page of the Gazette with the headline, Local Ranch Owner Fights Back Against Development Company Harassment. Sarah had done her homework, digging deeper into Apex's business practices and finding other instances where they'd used questionable tactics to acquire properties they wanted. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. I started getting calls from neighbors, from other ranchers, from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all offering support. The county commissioners received dozens of calls demanding they reject the tax assessment challenge. Local businesses put up signs saying, "We stand with Bo Carter." Tiffany called Preston, furious. "Your father has ruined my reputation," she screamed, loud enough that I could hear her through Preston's phone from across the room. "He's made me look like some kind of villain." "You are a villain," Preston said calmly. "You married me to steal my family's ranch. You tried to have my father declared incompetent. You're now trying to tax him out of his home. If your reputation is ruined, you did it to yourself." "I want a divorce." "Good. So do I. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." She hung up, and Preston looked at me with something like relief on his face. "Well, that's done. How do you feel?" "Honestly, free. For the first time since I met her, I feel free." But our celebration was premature. 2 days later, I got a letter from Apex Development Group's attorneys. They were suing me for defamation, claiming the newspaper article contained false and damaging statements about their business practices. They were seeking $5 million in damages. "This is a slap suit," James explained when I called him. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. They're not trying to win. They're trying to silence you and intimidate you with legal costs. It's become their go-to move when negative publicity threatens their business. Can they win? No. Everything in that article was documented and true. But defending against it will still cost money and time. That's the point. So what do? We file an anti-SLAPP motion to dismiss. In Montana, if we can prove their lawsuit is frivolous and intended to silence protected speech, they'll have to pay our legal fees. But it'll take months to resolve. Months. More legal battles. More uncertainty. More pressure designed to break me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to Margaret's grave in the moonlight and sat on the bench. I'm trying, Maggie, I said to the stone. I'm fighting as hard as I can. But I don't know if it's enough. They just keep coming, keep finding new ways to attack. And I'm tired. I'm so tired. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying no answers. When I walked back to the ranch house, I saw a light on in the office. Preston was there, hunched over the computer. What are you doing up? He looked up, his face illuminated by the screen. Research. If they want to fight dirty, we can fight dirty too. I'm going through every public record I can find on Apex Development Group, every lawsuit, every complaint, every business deal. There has to be something we can use. I pulled up a chair beside him. Show me what you found. We worked through the night, and as the sun rose over the mountains, we had something. Not a smoking gun, but a pattern. Apex had been involved in at least a dozen similar situations over the past 5 years. Properties they wanted, owners who resisted, sudden legal and financial pressures, followed by forced sales at below-market prices. We need to contact these people, Preston said. The other owners. Maybe if we all tell our stories together, we can build a case. A case for what? I don't know yet. But there's power in numbers. 1 rancher fighting back is a human interest story. 10 ranchers fighting back is a pattern of predatory behavior. That's a real news story. That's something that might actually hurt them. My son, I realized, had finally found something worth fighting for. And in the process, he'd discovered a strength I'd never seen in him before. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Over the next 2 weeks, Preston reached out to every property owner he could find who'd been targeted by Apex. Most didn't want to talk, afraid of legal retaliation. But 3 agreed to share their stories. There was Margaret Chen, a widow whose husband's timberland in Idaho had been acquired by Apex after a mysteriously timed environmental citation shut down her operation. There was Robert Dawson, who'd lost his family's guest ranch in Wyoming after Apex filed a complaint about water rights that turned out to be completely fabricated but took years and thousands of dollars to disprove. And there was Elena Rodriguez, whose vineyard in Colorado had been hit with the same property tax challenge we were facing. Sarah Mitchell from the Gazette wrote a follow-up story, Pattern of Predatory Practices, Montana Ranch Case Part of Larger Trend. This time, the story got picked up by the regional papers, then by a national news service. Suddenly, Apex Development Group was in the spotlight, and they didn't like it. Their CEO, Marcus Hendricks, issued a statement calling the allegations completely false and threatening legal action against anyone who continued to spread defamatory lies about the company. But the damage was done. Several of Apex's ongoing projects faced new scrutiny from local governments. Investors started asking questions. The company's stock price dropped. And 3 days after the second article ran, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Carter? This is Marcus Hendricks. I think we should talk. Marcus Hendricks wanted to meet in person. Neutral ground, he suggested. Somewhere we can have a private conversation without lawyers and reporters. I agreed to meet him at a diner in Millbrook, the kind of place with worn booths and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. Preston insisted on coming with me, and I was glad for the support. Hendricks arrived alone, looking less polished than he had at Preston's wedding. The negative press was clearly taking a toll. He slid into the booth across from us and got straight to the point. You've made your point, Mr. Carter. You've gotten your media attention, hurt our business, and turned yourself into some kind of folk hero fighting the big bad corporation. Congratulations. I didn't do it for attention. I did it to protect my ranch. And now you have. So let's talk about how we move forward from here. There's nothing to discuss. The ranch isn't for sale. Hendricks smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everything is for sale, Mr. Carter. It's just a matter of price. Apex is prepared to offer you $25 million for the Golden Horizon Ranch. That's well above market value, enough to set you up comfortably for the rest of your life and give your son here a very healthy inheritance. $25 million. It was a staggering amount, more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. No, I said. You didn't even think about it. I don't need to. The ranch isn't about money. It never has been. Hendricks leaned forward. Let me explain something to you. The tax assessment challenge? We'll win it eventually. Maybe not this year, but we'll keep appealing, keep fighting, until we find a judge who sees things our way. The defamation lawsuit? Even if you win, you'll spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars defending yourself. And there will be more lawsuits, more challenges, more pressure. We have unlimited resources and unlimited patience. How long can you hold out? As long as it takes. You're 70 years old. 65. 65. How much fight do you really have left? Wouldn't it be easier to take the money, enjoy your retirement, let someone else deal with the headaches? Preston spoke up before I could respond. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about easy. It's about legacy. It's about honoring the people who built something and protecting it for future generations. My grandfather didn't spend his life building this ranch so his granddaughter-in-law could turn it into a golf resort. Hendricks turned his attention to Preston. Ah yes, the prodigal son. Tell me, Preston, how does it feel knowing you were married for your inheritance? Knowing that Tiffany saw you as nothing more than a path to this property? Preston's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. It feels like I learned an important lesson about what really matters. Something you clearly never learned. What I've learned, Hendricks said coldly, is that sentiment doesn't pay bills. Apex has shareholders, investors, people depending on us to make profitable decisions. The Golden Horizon Ranch represents a significant opportunity. We're going to acquire it, one way or another. Is that a threat? I asked. It's a reality. You can fight us, waste your time and money, make yourself miserable for however many years you have left. Or you can accept our very generous offer and walk away with dignity and wealth intact. I stood up. This meeting is over. Think about it, Mr. Carter. Really think about it. Because this offer has an expiration date. If you refuse, the next offer will be lower. And the pressure will only increase. As Preston and I walked out of the diner, I felt anger burning in my gut. The arrogance of that man, thinking he could intimidate me into giving up everything Margaret and I had built. Dad, Preston said quietly as we got in the truck, what if he's right? What if they just keep coming at us until we can't fight anymore? Then we find allies. We build a coalition. We make it politically impossible for them to keep harassing us. How? I have an idea. That night, I made calls to every rancher, farmer, and landowner I knew in the county. I told them about Apex's tactics, about the pattern of predatory behavior, about the threat they pose to anyone who owned valuable land. They'll come for you next, I told them. Once they get my ranch, they'll set their sights on yours. We need to stand together. Most were sympathetic but cautious. Standing up to a company like Apex could be expensive and dangerous. But a few were willing to fight, and a few more became a few dozen when I organized a meeting at the community center in Millbrook. 75 people showed up. Ranchers, farmers, small business owners, all of them worried about outside developers changing the character of their community. I stood at the front of the room and told my story, showed them the documents, explained the tactics Apex had used. This isn't just about my ranch, I said. It's about all of our ranches, all of our businesses, all of our way of life. These development companies see Montana as the last frontier for luxury resorts and vacation homes. They see our land as nothing more than inventory. If we don't stand together, we'll fall one by one. A rancher named Tom Benson stood up. "What exactly are you proposing, Bo?" "I'm proposing we form a landowners' coalition. We pool our resources for legal defense, we share information about predatory tactics, and we present a united front to county commissioners and state legislators. We make it clear that Montana land isn't for sale to the highest bidder." The room erupted in discussion. Some were enthusiastic, others skeptical. But by the end of the night, we had 45 people committed to joining the coalition, including a lawyer named Patricia Vance who volunteered to handle the legal work pro bono. "My family has ranched in Montana for 4 generations," Patricia said. "I became a lawyer specifically to help protect agricultural land from developers. I'd be honored to help." The formation of the Montana Landowners Coalition made headlines. Sarah Mitchell wrote another article, this time focusing on the growing resistance to corporate land acquisition. A reporter from a Bozeman TV station came out to interview me. "Mr. Carter, some people say you're fighting progress, that development brings jobs and economic growth. What do you say to that?" "I say there's a difference between progress and exploitation. Yes, development can bring jobs, but at what cost? When you turn working ranches into golf courses and vacation homes, you lose the food production, you lose the AG jobs, you lose the culture and heritage that makes Montana what it is. Real progress would be supporting the ranches and farms that already exist, not destroying them for short-term profit." The interview aired during prime time, and my phone didn't stop ringing for 2 days. Some calls were supportive, others angry. One caller told me I was a communist trying to stop free enterprise. Another said I was a hero standing up to corporate greed. But the most important call came from State Senator Linda Morrison. "Mr. Carter, I've been following your situation with interest. I'd like to introduce legislation that would make it harder for outside developers to use legal harassment as a tactic for forced property acquisition. Would you be willing to testify before the state legislature?" "Absolutely." 2 weeks later, I found myself in Helena, the state capital, sitting at a table before the Senate Agricultural Affairs Committee. I told my story again, this time to elected officials who had the power to actually change things. "These predatory tactics hurt more than just individual landowners," I testified. "They hurt communities, they hurt Montana's agricultural economy, and they undermine the property rights these companies claim to respect. If a company wants to buy land, they should make a fair offer. If the owner says no, that should be the end of it. What shouldn't happen is years of legal harassment designed to force a sale." Senator Morrison's bill gained traction. It wasn't perfect, it wouldn't stop companies like Apex entirely, but it would make their tactics more expensive and risky. Apex, of course, fought back. They hired lobbyists, contributed to political campaigns, and launched their own PR campaign about the importance of property development for Montana's economic future. But something had shifted. The story wasn't just about one old rancher anymore. It was about a community standing up for its way of life. In the midst of all this, Preston's divorce proceedings began. Tiffany fought dirty, trying to claim she was entitled to a share of the ranch based on Preston's expectations of inheritance. Her lawyer argued that since Preston had believed he would inherit the ranch, and since Tiffany had made life decisions based on that belief, she should receive compensation. It was absurd, but it required another legal battle, another drain on resources and time. "She's not going to stop," Preston said one night. We were in the ranch office, reviewing legal bills that were piling up faster than we could pay them. "Even if she can't get the ranch, she's going to bleed us dry with legal fees." He was right. Between the tax assessment challenge, the defamation lawsuit, the divorce proceedings, and now the costs of running the Landowners Coalition, we were burning through money at an alarming rate. I'd taken out a loan against the ranch, something I swore I'd never do, just to keep up with the legal bills. "Maybe we should reconsider Hendrick's offer," Preston said quietly. I looked at him sharply. "Are you serious?" "I'm practical. Dad, we're drowning in legal fees. The ranch is profitable, but not enough to sustain this level of expense. What happens when we run out of money? What happens when they foreclose on the loan?" "We keep fighting," With what? Hope and determination? That doesn't pay lawyers. He was right, and I knew it. We were losing the war of attrition, slowly but surely being ground down by endless legal battles. That night, I walked out to Margaret's grave again. It had become a habit, this one-sided conversation with my dead wife. Maybe I was going senile after all. I don't know what to do, Maggie. I'm trying to honor your wishes, trying to protect the ranch, but they're beating us. Not with strength or righteousness, but with money and lawyers and time. I'm afraid I'm going to lose everything. Let me know in the comments where you have watched it from and what you would have done if you were in my place. If you loved my story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It inspires us to share more such stories with you.